Hello everyone, and welcome to the National Young Writers Festival 2022 panel, Insert Self Here. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I am broadcasting from, the Yagara and Turrbal people. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to the elders of the lands this recording might reach. My name is Anna Jacobson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a poet, artist, and writer. My poetry collection, Amnesia Findings, was published in 2019. I'll be guiding the panel tonight, and I'm very excited to be joined by Rafeif Ismail and Dženana Vucic. Dženana Vucic is a Bosnian-Australian writer, poet, critic, and editor. She has been awarded the 2022 Peter Blaisley Fellowship, the 2021 Cat Muscat Fellowship, and a 2020-21 Wheeler Centre Hot Desk Fellowship to work on her auto-theoretical novel about identity, memory, myth, and history making. The Bosnian War and coming to Australia as a refugee. That's just incredible. Rafeif Ismail is an award-winning emerging multilingual storyteller and editor based in Boorloo, Western Australia. Rafeif's work has been published in anthologies and literary magazines across Australia and internationally, with a debut novel forthcoming, which is just so exciting, Rafeif. It's wonderful. And tonight we'll each introduce our work and then discuss some questions in relation to the theme of Insert Self Here. So for me, writing is a way of understanding myself, events, and people. And the impetus for my memoir writing and poetry was to piece myself together after the splintering of my memory and self from psychosis 10 years ago. So I felt the madness itself, it was a void that has no current memory, and I've had to knit and braid myself around its form, inserting myself into the gaps. So I went from needing memory games for my recovery in 2011 to creating my own interactive memoir in 2020 as part of my PhD that demonstrated my experience of memory loss. I used multiple choices that linked different alternatives and possibilities that exist in my memory. And I also combined visual mediums and created animations and drawings, which I embedded. So How to Knit a Human, the interactive version, can be accessed on my website and was made on a free software program called Twine, which allows the creation of choice-based narratives. So I'll share my screen to briefly introduce you to the work tonight. And just to note that this work contains experiences of madness, ECT, and some stop motion animations, but hopefully you can see How to Knit a Human. So it's got an animation of a woman lying on a bed, her hair spiraling out like branches, leaves sprouting and then growing back into her head. So we'll click on Begin. You are in a white room and something has changed. Something has happened to your memory. Do you walk to the shower or walk down the corridor? And there's a drawing of a woman lying in a bed, a plastic band around her wrist. Her curly hair coils over the pillow. Tonight I'm going to choose corridor. And so there's an animation of hairy legs pacing up and down a corridor. A woman is watching you, a pretty nurse with curly blonde hair. She suggests you have a shower. Do you go and have a shower? Or ask, how long have I been here? So tonight I'll pick, how long have I been here? 6 weeks, you've just had another round of ECT. You know what ECT is, electroconvulsive therapy. You try to keep hold of your expression. And there's a digital collage. A woman holds a mirror with her image repeating indefinitely in the reflection. In one of the reflections, a teardrop runs down the woman's face. Around the edges of the collage are the words, and all I see reflected is this image. The nurse has upset you and you don't want her to see. At the same time, a feeling of acceptance washes through you. What month is it? Asked the nurse. You have a feeling it is May. So I'm going to guess May. The nurse writes down your answer. It's August, she tells you. An animation of the words April and May turn into the words August. A different nurse places a rectangular wafer in your palm. You don't know what to do with it, so you put the wafer on your tongue. So that's the start of the piece. I'll just stop sharing, and you're welcome to explore the rest on my website if you are keen in my project portfolio. But I'm so keen to hear from Dženana and Rafeif. So Dženana, you're welcome to share, introduce and share your story, and then Rafeif. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anna. That was incredible. By the way, I'm really impressed with this twine business. I need to look into that myself.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm speaking today from Wurundjeri land, and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past and present. And I also just want to give a quick heads up that my piece deals with there's a mention of suicide, and also it mentions and sort of revolves around war and the trauma of war. So fair warning, but please do sit out if you need to. So this is called First Year After War, and it was published originally in Peach Mag online. When I am 5 or maybe 6, and home is low-income high-rise and the clamour of arguments no neighbours understand, I watch from the lounge window behind government-issue blinds this brand new life, which is quiet despite the road beneath us. So quiet. Later, we will cry at the machine gun pop of fireworks, drop to the ground, hands overhead at a car's backfire, always flinch at raised voices and unexpected bodies on the other side of doors. Later, we will make our own noise, howl against the rattle of unmoored lungs, scream fists into past sick bodies, throw ourselves awake, drenched in shaking. But here is a moment of fracture, of still. I stare at the high-rise opposite, a woman as she feigns at flight, a moment of quiver and hold, of reach, the expansiveness of arms wide and encompassing. I imagine her to shout, "Gledajta imam, ovaj veliki i bezgranični život." And then she is landed, ungainly. I do not hear her cry, but surely she must. I cannot know how to uncouple noise from terror, and even in shell shock there is an ear break pitch, and all dying screams and whimpers and chokes. My mother says my name over and over, her voice tilts with frustration, and I turn to her, sitting with a friend on our government-issue couch, her friend who is Australian, the first to sip coffees with her, eat bickies with her, even through the breaking sentences and questions like how to say makaze, her hand raised horizontal, 2 fingers extended. Scissors, I tell her, and nekajena je pala strozra. But she does not hear or pretends, says to the Australian, scissors. And then there is laughter, delayed punchline, politeness in the face of jokes that do not translate. I turn back to the window, the woman. How do you fall from a building unshaken by bombs? How do you fall unrunning from gunfire? When I am 29, I will not remember if I see the body or if it is the thing Frankenstein from shrapnel and exit wounds, superimposed on this idyllic suburban street. I will remember only that it is 5 minutes before the sirens, and the world becomes loud in the familiar. Shouting, a TV crew, men in uniforms, panic and rush. I will remember that I do not tell the psychiatrist, who earlier that day said, "When the bad thing comes, you must not fight it. Turn to it and say, 'This is a dream, and I am not afraid.' But it isn't. But I am. Everyone knows not to stand near the windows. What has happened? My mother is beside me, hand on shoulder, her friend beside her, hand over mouth. A woman fell, I tell them, and to my mother, "Tosam tirekla." Oh God, oh God, oh God, how awful. My mother and I are silent. It does not feel awful. Us here in this whole apartment, with our couch and our table, our unrationed milk, coffee, a TV playing the news, and Sarajevo flashing bitter on the screen. Okay, so that was my poem. I hope you enjoyed it, I guess. And it's now, I'll turn it over to Rafeif.
Wow. Both your works are so powerful that I am just speechless. And Dženana, just from one refugee to another, wow, thank you for just, putting into words what sometimes just feels like it can't be spoken. So I'm Rafeif Ismail. I'm coming to you from the sovereign Buja of the Wajak Noongar people here in Burulu. I pay my respects to all First Nations people across this continent and in their fight for and their resistance and their resilience. I'm here. My work explores, it started as an exploration of identity, what it means to be in exile from home. It started as a way of understanding war and genocide and the ongoing things that come with that. And I think it's sort of evolved as a way to hold myself accountable. And I've kind of just started creating, like, the works that I created recently are very different to things that I had done like decades ago. So the poem I'll be sharing is called "The Physics of Self." It was first published in Cordate Poetry Review. Quantum entanglement posits that two or more objects may exist in reference to one another, regardless of space-time. My doctor calls it complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Says dissociation instead of liberation. Says flashback instead of memory. Said then instead of now, here, always. Every knee is tired. I don't want to do this, Khaltu. Can you believe this, girl? You're here, surrounded by possibilities. And baby girl, a possibility isn't something you having had, just throw away. It's a fruit, bite in, swallow the flesh and the rind, the complex, bittersweet experience. Why do you wear your sorrow like a chain, dragging, always stopping just before the finish line? That wave function duality, Schrodinger's health. If they can't see it, they don't have to acknowledge it. Ubiquitous repressions of worldly cruelties. You turn to your friend and say, "Hey fam, I got a joke for you. Yeah? When do you know when a black woman's struggling?" She laughs. At her funeral, of course. There are eulogies encoded in your DNA. Trauma has no time limit and recovery is a myth. Once, a psychologist told me that I was trapped in a cage of my own memories. To leave the past in the past and focus on the here and now. But some wars have no borders, they obey no time zone. Now, here, and always, every me is fighting.
That was incredible, Rafeif. So powerful, both you and Dženana's work. Just incredible pieces. And thank you so much for sharing that. So now we'll get into the questions. And after such a rich, beautiful, incredible reading from you both, and as we are a very diverse panel, I would be interested in hearing what role do our cultural backgrounds play in understanding and expressing identity in our writing? So I guess for me, I draw on I sometimes draw on the rituals and objects in my Jewish culture as metaphors. For example, the Havdalah prayer, also known as the separation ceremony, separates the Sabbath from the rest of the week through the smelling of spices in a spice box. So I thought I'd just share a poem, my poem Separation Ceremony from Amnesia Findings, to give you an example of how I bring my culture into my writing. So, separation ceremony. In this separation ceremony, we are not separating the Sabbath from the rest of the week. We are separating myself from myself. I'm not aware of the spice box on my head letting voices in, though I can smell its scent from generations ago. Cinnamon, cloves, myrtle twigs. After 6 weeks, the spice box retracts like a mechanical spider, curls up in my mind. Silver filigree imprints my skin like a pillow creasing a face after coma. These marks fade over months. The spice box in my mind has a locked door. No spices can come in or out. If or when it opens, I do not know if the memories will come or if new ones will be created or retained. But I know I will recognize its smell. Cinnamon, cloves, myrtle twigs, the scent of old silver. So thank you so much. And I would love to hear from you both with such incredible cultural backgrounds that you both have, how you understand and express identity through your works as well. Yes, just feel free to jump in, or Dženana or Rafeif.
I guess I'll jump in.
Thanks, Rafeif.
So, first of all, that was gorgeous. And as you were describing that, I was just reminded of Bahur, like the incense that we burn here. And I was just, so thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I draw on a lot of my Central Sudanese heritage in my writing, and my writing is often as the way of finding out about that heritage. In my family and in our culture, our histories are told in stories. So oftentimes, growing up, like my grandmother would tell us a fable or folk tale or something that happened to a distant relative, and from that we would have a lesson. When having been forced to leave home super early, there was an interruption in that process of learning, and an interruption in the retention of that knowledge. And so I've kind of gone back to what I know now, in terms of just, reimagining the stories that I do remember, but also asking about the ones that I don't. And from that, I've learned so much about not just the personal family history, but the history of the region that we're in and how it's changed over decades and centuries. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you, Rafeif. That's incredible. Dženana, would you like to share?
Yes, I just also want to say, like, I'm so impressed by both of your words. They spoke to me so deeply. But to answer the question and not spend too long just idolizing the both of you, I think for me it's, how do I say this? It really resonates with me what Rafeif's just said about this sort of interruption. And I feel very much the same happened when we left Bosnia. And then we sort of embarked upon this process of aggressive assimilation and didn't speak Bosnian and just really tried to put a lot of that world behind us. And I think a lot of what I'm doing in my writing is attempting to recover that or attempting to rediscover that and also discover my place in that, because my family's Muslim, for example, but I'm atheist, and it's a difficult thing for me to understand how I fit into Islam in Bosnia, because I do, by virtue of like the war. It was a war of genocide in which the Muslim population was in concentration camps and massacred, and so sort of by virtue of what my family is, I guess, I'm sort of culturally Muslim, but not necessarily religiously so. And I think elements like this, for me, really prove how complicated and somewhat arbitrary identity is. Like, these constructs are in fact just constructs, and they matter a lot, of course, to me as well. But I think a lot of what my writing is trying to do is disentangle the ways in which we imagine ourselves as individuals, as part of groups, as holders of identity, and to what extent those things are, I guess, like real existing facts, and to what extent they are sort of mitigated by the world around us. So I think that's a lot of what I'm trying to figure out in my writing, sort of figuring out my place in Bosnia, in Australia, and trying to, I guess, massage the possibilities within those identities to figure out where I am.
Wow, thank you, Dženana. That's, just such incredible insights. And from both Rafeif and Dženana, I'm just so excited to be on this panel. Just incredible. I thought we can come back to that, to identity, if we have time, because it's such a rich source. But I thought bringing it back to memoir writing, do boundaries exist for you in memoir writing, when either writing about yourself or others who are connected to your story? So I guess for me, it took me 5 years to feel comfortable in being open about my mental illness and to publish my writing about it publicly. But now that the boundary has disappeared, it feels very freeing, but it does come with risks in the form of stigma as well. But I just feel that allowing others to feel seen and heard and represented is also so important. So I feel that now, in a way, I am performing advocacy through my poems sometimes. And in terms about writing about others, it can be very fraught. So if writing about family members who become part of my story, I do my best to consult with them and run the poem and memoir piece by them before publishing. So those are some of the boundaries that that I've come across. Dženana or Rafeif, yes, how do you feel, what boundaries do you feel exist for you in your memoir writing, when writing about yourself or others? And yeah, I'd love to hear.
I might go first this time to start things up.
Thanks, Dženana.
No worries. I think this is a really interesting question, because I think so much of being a memoir writer, and I think also so much about being a young or an emerging writer, is feeling like you're constantly having those boundaries pushed as well, because so much, I guess to some extent what you write best might be the things that are closest to you, but also I suppose what's most interesting to a lot of people is that kind of maybe the darker or the more traumatic or the more profoundly affecting experiences. And I think it's a very difficult thing to navigate. I think for me, the sort of boundaries I try and set, I'm very interested in excavating my relationship to Bosnia. And that's something that I'm very willing to do publicly, because it's also just a war that people don't know anything about. You know, people ask me, where is Bosnia? Or like mention that they remember something about the war. But I think it's always important to remind people that there have been gross violences committed against peoples, and they're still being committed against peoples. And we sort of fixate, I think, on a couple that we can sort of remember that are close to us. But I think if every person, not every person, but if it was possible that we try to remember or hold in our hearts some of the other tragedies that are happening around the world, and have compassion and space for them as well. I don't think it would change the world necessarily, but for me, it's a moral point that I care about a lot. So even though it sometimes pains me, and I find that I do end up crossing my own boundaries in writing about it, I do find it very important. On the other hand, there are also other aspects of myself that I don't want to write about, and I think it's a healthy boundary. For example, my relationship to my gender, it's something that I am figuring out privately, and it's not something that I'm willing to share with the world beyond sort of asking people to use the correct pronouns, for example. But beyond that, like that's sort of, I mean, maybe I just don't have anything interesting to say about it, but I think it's also that I don't want to perform every aspect of me working out how to be in the world for the public. And then sort of to answer the question about writing about others, I remember once reading a piece, I edited a piece in which someone included a narrative. They were telling a story, an anecdote, to make a point. And I was there for the anecdote. I was physically present about the thing they were talking about. And it was a bit strange because in order to make their point, they sort of had to turn everyone else into, I guess, like flat characters, or to like refuse to allow us a certain depth or a certain perceptivity. And I didn't mind so much. I understood what was happening, but I thought, oh gosh, the other people in this anecdote who might read this will be hurt. And they'll be hurt because this person wrote it like this, and because I've allowed it to go out into the world as it was. And I feel like this has really affected how I write about others in my life, because I think there's such a gap between who they are and how I'm able to represent them. And it feels so unfair because everyone is far more fully realized and far bigger and more encompassing and expansive than I can capture, even if I spent 50,000 words on it. But I think it's made me really aware of never using people as a means to tell my story, and to try and make sure that insofar as other people are in my work, I don't try and cross their boundaries. And I always try and give them more depth insofar as I can, or at least to try and make clear that my view is just my view or my side is just my side, because I don't want to diminish anyone in my work. What do you think, Rafeif?
I so hear you on kind of acknowledging our own subjectivity when we write about others. I've tried to do that a lot in my practice recently because I realized as a Leo, I like everything to be about me. And therefore, when I'm writing to give context, other characters, characters, when I'm writing other people, I write them as characters, which isn't necessarily the best thing, because while there is a creative element to creative nonfiction, the way we can present folks can sometimes just, like, people change, and like the person that you're like talking about and writing about may have had a period of growth and just become a completely, like, had this transformation that you weren't privy to, and I found that a lot because I write about myself and my family and our experiences through that, and like the when I write about my parents, I used to think of them as like static, but my gosh, the transformation and the change that they've undergone in the past year alone, let alone the past 20 years, means that there's no way I can do justice to them when I'm just, writing from my point of view. So I've definitely been consulting a lot more. And just looking at the group chat, and our moderator being like, "Look, Leah season is over. Let another star sign shine" is absolutely beautiful. This is definitely in theme with the festival. Thank you, Jess. Um, yeah. In terms of, I guess, writing the self, there's a lot of myself that I do not want perceived. um, like my relationship with my gender, my relationship with my health, my body, like so many things I just would rather not talk about. But unfortunately, I feel that there is sometimes a responsibility when you have a platform to speak on certain issues because it's the only way. So so I talk about complex PTSD and mental health, about war and genocide, and all the really, really uncomfortable topics that for some reason people in privileged positions love to read about, but will not do a single thing to help, like, alleviate. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts about like how like writing the self and writing memoir has become so like this commodified thing in our industry, and there's only like one sort of narrative that publishers and readers want to have, that narrative of either trauma or triumph.
Oh, that's, just such incredible discussions of the complexities of boundaries. And I think in terms of the triumph and trauma, I think sometimes in memoir writing, readers want a happy ending, but in memoirs about mental illness, they're sometimes, it's just an ongoing journey. And so I think, it's a very interesting question, Rafeif, and I think, it's so tricky because on the one hand, the triumph is, it can be wonderful for the person who has solved all their problems, but I guess and then the trauma is just such difficult things to navigate. Dženana, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was just thinking about how the triumph story can only exist if the rest of the life is sort of forgotten about. You know, when I think about any moment in my life which has been the triumph, it was really crap afterwards also. You know, if I wrote the narrative of my life, I suppose escaping to Australia is the triumph. But then you have a 23-year-old mother of 2 young daughters, all of them with post-traumatic stress, all of them, completely unable to deal. And then life was pretty awful for a while, for a long time. And so then I guess the next triumph would be, I don't know, at some point in my mid-20s when I wasn't suicidal anymore. But then, what is the what is the triumph really beyond just kind of cutting it short because you don't want to tell the rest of the story? So I think that's, I just don't really believe in triumphs, I don't think. But it does really intrigue me that this is so much what we want, or what the literary industry seems to really want from people, and particularly from people who have had experiences of trauma. They want like the really, really bad stuff, and they want it to be really, really bad. They want to like read all about the details and the blood and the guts and like how bad you felt, all of that. And then they also want you to like be fine at the end of it, because you absolutely cannot need help afterwards. You need to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, be fine. There's no need for like psychological assistance. There's no need for, I don't know, like an expansive healthcare system that will help you deal with any of this stuff. There's no need to question the capitalist imperatives of this entire thing. So I feel like it's just this strange Ouroboros that feeds itself, and then also it becomes what people expect from a story. So we just end up like, feeding the market, and then the market is expecting this, and then they want this, and I don't know. It's not a healthy way to go by any stretch, and I find it quite imaginatively limited in some sense, but. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think, definitely don't have a solution, but have many complaints.
So I hear you with all the complaints, but also, sorry, I'm clapping in my mind right now.
Just incredible insights. Yeah,
absolutely. I was just thinking that when we write works, we're writing snapshots, and we really we can't. I don't know about either of you, but I look at some writing and some things I've shared that I would absolutely not share. Now that I'm a bit older, wiser, and hopefully less likely to be exploited by the industry. And just those, as you mentioned, Dženana, they people expect you to be fine through the creating process and to be fine afterwards. And to be totally honest, a while ago, I told myself I'll never write memoir again, because I was working on a piece. It was only 3,000 words, but by the end of it, I was shattered. I was so absolutely shattered, and it took me about 6 months to finish this work, and I had no idea why I was slogging away at 3,000 words over 6 months for a measly $200 and no psychological support and nothing like that. And I do believe that it should be a policy that if you intend to commission writers, that you have facilities and services to make sure your writers are all right. especially when they're creating works that impact their everyday. When you write creative nonfiction, I'm not saying that fiction doesn't have the same psychological impact, but you're not reliving certain memories and moments. And so, yeah, I think the only ethical way moving forward is to actually have those facilities of support in place before like writers are commissioned.
Absolutely, Rafeif. That is such a good point, because writing memoir, it can be healing, but if it's not the right time and you've been commissioned to create this piece, it can, yeah. I was going to use the word rip you to shreds, like just mentally, because it's just
So accurate.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I feel that yes, I think that's possibly one of the questions that so yes, I was going to ask, how does writing heal and create understanding and epiphany for you when written at the right time in your life? But conversely, as Rafeif has said, it can also send you into a spiral of. So I think it's all about the balance, and not balance, I guess, but just having those supports in place. It's a tricky one. I guess, Dženana or Rafeif, have you felt in other ways it can be healing or create more understanding when it is the right time?
I have an example of when it kind of was for me, and it was a couple of years ago now that I wrote this piece, and it was a poem, I guess, kind of like a prosy poem, called Newcastle. And I wrote it after the Christchurch massacre. And so in that massacre, 51 Muslim people were killed in their house of prayer, and the white supremacist terrorist who did that, he had "remove kebab" written on his guns. And "remove kebab" is a meme, but it's a song. The song that it refers to is actually called "Kada Vodi Srbe Svoje," and it's a propaganda song from the Bosnian War, in which like three soldiers are playing like the accordion and singing, I think, and it's also interspersed with images of Muslim men in concentration camps looking really emaciated. And it was when the terrorist attack happened, I was in Glasgow, and so I was very, very far away, but it really hit me. I think just in like this kind of shock of I don't know, I just thought like the war is over, and yet it felt very close. And of course, these kind of acts of violence have been going on around the world, and I think it's a bit silly also for me to be like, oh, this is the one that's going to like really hurt me. But it was also, my mum calling and being like very, very afraid that there was this Australian madman who, maybe represented part of a group. And she was very afraid. And I guess that's how PTSD works. It doesn't have to be rational, but it's there. But I wrote this piece, Newcastle, about trying to understand how something that happened in the Bosnian War could get decontextualized and recontextualized and then crop up 25 years later, or 20 years later, I guess at that point, in another grotesque act of violence and another massacre. And it didn't feel like healing might be the wrong word for it, but it offered me an opportunity to think about it in a slightly more abstract way. I think the act of writing the poem and trying to also think about how to write this and how to frame it in terms of sort of the aesthetics of the poem also offered me another way in to the actual experience, or like sort of to digest the experience. And I think that for me was like one of the few moments where I really felt like, oh, I processed something through writing this. I think usually I'm still processing as I'm writing, and it's an ongoing process, and I'm still not sure that I'm finished. But I think in this poem, I really felt like I've been able to process and understand and accept my anger, my frustration, and my fear and my hurt. And then also just sit with it, because there is no solution to the questions I ask in this poem. That's the point of it. It's sort of scream into the void. But I don't know. I guess I see it as definitely possible sometimes. Healing, I'm not so sure about, but at least like coming to some kind of peace within myself about it, maybe. What about you, Rafeif?
First of all, I love what you both said. I think for me, seeing other people's work is healing. My own, not so much, because I'm still oftentimes in the middle of processing things. So that catharsis really doesn't come, if it ever comes. I'm still currently trying to write an unfinished essay about like Jasoni's dictatorship. It has been unfinished since 2019. So every time I try and finish this work, something new crops up. And so it honestly just feels like, I'm just every time, some new atrocity happens, something new happens, and I just can't seem to find a conclusion to this work, which, like, I feel now I've come to peace with that, because there is no conclusion to the atrocities that are happening there. And so, but seeing other works, seeing other writers is so healing. When I picked up Claudia Rankine's Citizen a few years ago and just looked at her poems, I was like, that can happen? Oh my gosh. And it blew my mind, this depiction of just everything. While I resonated with Claudia Rankine's work, it was it was absolutely like an experience, but it wasn't like, I don't think I can do that with my own work. Like, I don't think my work can bring me closure. All it can do is offer information and advocacy for the causes I'm writing about. Like, it at this point in time, it's not cathartic at all.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing those incredible points in this rich discussion. I feel we could just keep discussing forever. I feel that leads us wonderfully into the question: who are some writers and artists who have led the way for you in terms of this kind of writing? So how did their work resonate for you, and who, working in this field now, do you find inspiration in? So I guess for me, after I became unwell in 2011, I wanted to seek representation and see myself in stories and understand how other women writers had experienced and navigated madness. So I read memoirs like Flying with Paper Wings by Sandy Jeffs, An Unquiet Mind by Kay Redfield Jamison, Madness, a Memoir by Kate Richards, Elmo Keep's article, Summer and Antipsychotics in the City. And later I also read Paula Keogh's The Green Bell. So there were some of the works that I was drawn to, although I was always searching for, they express their madness, like most of them could remember in detail their psychosis, and I just, it feels like because I don't remember mine, I've had this experience taken, but so at the same time, it's, just I guess as a writer, I want to know what it would have been like. I have the edges, but not that I ever want to experience it again. I guess the writer in me is always going to be the observer, and that an experience was taken from me as in the form of memory loss is always so, just a feeling of having that agency taken away. But I did really connect with, found that connection with those books I mentioned. So, Dženana, would you like to share some of the writings that the writers you found inspiration in?
Definitely. I think for me, I was really inspired by like the sort of third wavy, third world feminist movement, and this push for like the personal is political, but then also like presenting theory and politics and this heavily theoretical and political writing through the I guess like the vehicle of one's own experience. And because I really like sort of creative nonfiction that is a bit less about me and a bit more about, I don't know, the rental market in Melbourne, for example. And so I found a lot of inspiration in people like Gloria Anzaldúa or Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, also Simone de Beauvoir, which is a little long-winded. And I don't know that my feminism really aligns with Beauvoir's, but certainly I was really inspired by what she was doing. And then also people like Saidiya Hartman or Sara Ahmed, who are more contemporary, like academics, but also people who are really committed to having themselves represented in the work as, I don't think just a comment on positionality per se, but I think also a means of sort of contextualizing the work and understanding that there are different realities or like different material realities for different subjects. And I think that was something that to me was just incredibly inspiring and like a really strong ethical impulse. But then I also really more recently like Eula Biss or also Claudia Rankine as well, like wow, like just such an incredible literary force, unbelievable. Also Carmen Maria Machado, I think, does her In the Dream House. Like, wow. And then Evelyn Aralewin's Drop Bear, like that has just stayed with me. I read it, I don't know when it first came out, and I keep going back to it. And it's just really like the mixture of the personal and the poetic and this prose form. I don't know, I just find it really fascinating and innovative. And so anyone or any writer who can mix the forms like that, Gloria Anzaldúa also does this, but I just find that so incredibly powerful because it offers multiple possibilities for entry to a reader as well. Okay, I've rambled a lot just now, sorry, but a lot of people.
Those are wonderful recommendations. And Rafeif, are there any, apart from Rankin's work. Would you like to add any others, or
I'm seconding all of the recommendations you both gave, and adding Maxine Benita Clark's work, which is absolutely fabulous. Ellen Van Neven's Throat took my breath away. And yeah, I will think of so many more once we finish this. So I guess this is why you should see our other events at the beginning of the festival.
That's wonderful. Oh, thank you so much to you both, Rafeif and Dženana. I've just been so inspired and awed by both your presence and the words you've spoken. So it's been an honour being on the panel with you, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight as well.
Very grateful to have been on the panel with both of you. An absolute honour. And yeah, thank you to everyone who's joined us, and enjoy the rest of the festival, or have a good conclusion to the festival if you're not going to go back and watch things, which you should.
Yeah, thank you so much also for moderating us, Anna. You did an incredible job, and I felt very safe in your hands.
Thank you so much.
No worries. It was such a wonderful conversation with the two of you. I'm really glad that we will maybe be able to do this some other time as well, maybe not in front of a potential audience of thousands of people. I said it, thousands.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you.